Okay, so today this is going to be a quick introduction into React. So I'm assuming with this you have none to very little React experience. So let's just go into it and let's create a React project. So to do this, I'm going to run this command. I'm going to use yarn, create, and then space React app. And then we're going to give it the name of whatever we want to call this. So this will be called, we'll just call this React demo. And this is going to create a React application for us. This is much like, if you're familiar with Rails, this is a lot like the Rails new command. Except we're doing yarn create React app. This one takes a second because we have to go up, we have to like download all of these JavaScript packages, so it's actually downloading everything onto your computer. While this is running though, you can go ahead and cd into this package, or into this project, and open it up in VS Code. Still building. All right, so that's done. So I can cd into here and run React demo, or cd into that. Now, if I want to start this, here's the command right here. I can run yarn start. And that's going to pull this up on localhost 3000. Now, if you have a Rails app running, for now, you're just going to have to quit your Rails server and run this. All right, so let's go into the code and kind of see what we have. I'm not going to go too much into detail. We're really pretty much going to be doing most of our work today in the source folder in this app.js. And actually, I'm just going to take this all and I'm going to delete it because we're going to just start from scratch and start building out our React component. So the first thing we need to do is we need to import React from React. Then we can define our function. So the file is called app, or we need to define our component. Now for this, I'm going to be using all functional components. There's something called a class component. I'm not going to go into that. So we're just going to be using functional components. So I'm going to go ahead and call this app. Set this equal to a function, and then we can return what is called JSX. So JSX is it's HTML-like code where we can embed JavaScript. So this is JSX. And if we want to write JavaScript, we can use the curly brackets. And now I'm able to write JavaScript. So anything outside of these brackets is just going to be interpreted as, you know, the inner text of the HTML element, but here, inside of the curly brackets, that's going to be interpreted as JavaScript. We can export default app. Right. So now I can refresh this. And this is JSX, 1 + 1 = 2. Sweet, so let's go ahead. Let's try to add some styling. Let's say we wanted to add a class of like container. Now class is, remember, we're in a JavaScript file and class is a reserved word in JavaScript. So this is not HTML, this is JSX, so there's a couple small differences. If I want to add a class, I actually need to call it class name. And then in my index.css, or let's do this in the app CSS, I can go ahead and delete all of this code. This is auto-generated for us. Let's go ahead and do .container. And now we can just type some CSS in here. Does not like about this. Oh, it's empty. So let's do like a max width of, let's say, I don't know, 800 pixels. And then for our HTML, let's just do a background color of, just pick out like a light white. So, I don't know, like a pound FCFCF. Be pretty, just a nice little off-white. Then our container, we're going to give it a max width, and then let's do a margin auto, just to kind of center everything. Can go back, hit refresh. Oh, now one thing I'm forgetting, I'm not actually importing this CSS anywhere. So how do I import CSS into my JavaScript, into this JavaScript? Well, I can actually just say import app.css. Now really I should probably have not have that uppercase, it's not a huge deal. And then I'm just going to give this the relative path. So the app CSS lives in the same folder as our app.js, so that's what the // is. That says, hey, look in this source folder, because that's where I'm at, and then look for the app CSS file. And now we can see that we have that max width that's been applied and this has been centered. So now we're actually grabbing those changes. Now if you notice, there's also an index CSS that has some default styling that we can leave for there. And then we also have this index.js. Now this index.js, this is really where we take all of our React components, which is going to be, at the end of the day, everything's kind of going to be put into our app. And then we're going to have this index.js take this app and it actually appends, it goes through the code, it converts it to HTML, and then it actually appends it to the HTML. And if you look, it says document get element by ID root, and we're doing React DOM render. Well, this is where we take all of our components and actually render them to the DOM. And if you look at it, here's our one index.html page. And this is actually HTML, and then we have our one div within our body right here, ID equals root. So we generate the HTML with React, and then we just plop it in here. It's an oversimplification, but I think that's good enough for now. So we don't really need to change this file. You know, if you need to add any like links to like Google fonts or something, you can do it here. But this is our HTML page. So you can change this right here, React app, add some exclamation marks, and now it changes this up there in our tab. Cool. So let's go back to our app.js. We've done a little styling. We've just done a brief demo on our embedded JavaScript and what JSX is. Let's go ahead and add maybe a way. Let's create a div inside of here, and let's go ahead and maybe add like a button. Let's have like a toggle function inside of here. Because what I want to have is I'm going to have a div inside of here that is like, you know, maybe we have a div that's like, we have a part that has like the front. Like we want to do some sort of card where we have the front and the back. And I want to be able to toggle between, you know, the front and the back, these two divs, when I click on this button. So let's do it this, let's start out with this way. So let's say up here I have a variable that is like show front. And I'm just going to hard code that to true. So I have a variable show front, that's true. So what I could actually do, just to kind of keep this clean, is let's make a method call the render card. And const render card. And now I can do something like this. If show font, then you know I can return that JSX, that was my front, so this can be div. Maybe we'll even throw in an H1 or like an H3 for this. So front, if that's not true, we can return the back. Okay. So by default, our show front is true, so we should really just see this front and not the back. There we go, so we see the front. If I make this false, now it says back. Now obviously I don't have to go back and forth between my code to do this. So I need to create some state. My application has this state of show front. Like, is this true or false? And I need to keep track of that state. So this is a core concept in React, and that is state. So we're going to have many things in our components that can change. For example, whether we show the front or back. So let's see how we can do this in React to toggle this. So I'm going to use what's called a use state hook. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to keep this show front font the same, but I'm going to do this. I'm going to create this show font variable, and then I'm also going to create this set show front variable. I'm going to create set this equal to use state false. So use state is what's referred to as a React hook. And use state gives us a way to create state or to have state in our app, and then it also gives us a way to update that state. You might think if we didn't have this use state that, you know, we could come in here and define our own, you know, set show front method. But, you know, where we could, you know, set the show font, or I keep calling it show font, but it's show front equal to, you know, like not show front. But we can't do this in React. This wouldn't work, even though it would make sense logically. This is just not going to work with React. React does a lot under the hood for us, maintaining this state and re-rendering this component. So we have to use, with the functional component, if we want to have state, we have to use this use state hook. So now I get this function set show front, which gives me the ability to change this. So now on my button, what I can do is I can do this handle, I can do an on click, and let's just call this function toggle show front. So now I need to define this function. So def, sorry, that's Ruby. So I'm going to do const toggle show front and here I can just do this. I can call my set show front, and I'm going to set this equal, this is a little trick, I'm going to set this equal to whatever the opposite of what show front is. So that's going to give me the effect. If show front is true, I'm just going to negate it, which would make it false. And if it was false and I negated it, it would make it true. So this is the way I can just toggle this back and forth. So let's look at this and then we'll kind of explore what's going on. So if I come here and now I toggle this button, now it is actually toggling back and forth. And now I can have this state of, you know, creating, showing the front and back. So what's happening is so once again, I'm using this use state hook. This is from React, and this set show front method. So this is actually doing something whenever we call this method. Whenever we call this method and we change show front, it's actually re-triggering this function to be called, and it's re-triggering this code to be returned. So this is why we have to use this hook, because this set show front, not only does it change the state, but after we change the state in our React component, it re-renders our React component. So I could do like a console.log here, just right before the return. Before return, I could call this like rendering UI. It's just rendering the UI to the DOM. I can inspect. So notice it's the first, if I refresh, sorry, I went to the wrong page. If I refresh, I get that, you know, app line 26, before return, we're rendering the UI. If I toggle this, it keeps on hitting that. So it's just calling that function again and again, and we're just returning this and re-rendering it to the DOM. I can have more than one state. I can have like a count. And then maybe I want this count to start off at 0. And then every time we call this toggle show front, I could go ahead and set count. And let's just set this equal to count plus 1. And then let's change this to, say, count equals, and then we'll go ahead and just throw in our count variable. So this is JSX, our count is 0. Let's go ahead and toggle this. So there it's 1, 2, 3, and then we're also toggling the back and front. So every time I click that, it's adding 1 to the count, and we're re-rendering. Cool. So let's say I want to add another card, because right now all I have is one card. And you know, maybe I want to add some styling, that kind of thing. Well, I've kind of written this code in a way that that would be pretty hard to do, because I'd essentially just kind of have to like rewrite this function render card and do like render another card. And then I could do something like this. But I'm not even going to do that, because this is going to get messy really, really quick. So what I want to actually do, and one of the very big benefits of React, and part of the whole reason we use React, is I can abstract this logic for the card and create a card component, and that card component can have its own state, and then I can reuse that. So it gives us this way to create components and reuse them. So I can come in here, create a new card component. I'm going to call it card.js. Let's go ahead and import React from React. And then let's just say const card. Let's make this a function. And for now, let's just return div h1 card. And then we can export default this card. Okay, so now I have this card component, And now in my app.js, I could come in here and I'm going to write it like this, just like I would like an HTML element or a JSX element, but just the name of the component, which we uppercase. That's just kind of convention in React to uppercase your components. And I need to make sure I import this. Now I can use, with VS Code, I can use tab complete to import that. And here it is. I'm importing card from the source folder. So in the directory I am and the card.js. Now I don't need the .js extension because by default, if it's a JS extension, it's going to just assume it's JS. If it's something like CSS, I'm going to need to add the extension. So if it's anything other than JS, I need to add the extension. So now I have this card component and I can reuse it multiple times. Oh, looks like I have a error in my function. Render card has already been defined. Did I actually? Oh yeah, I did define that twice. Sorry, I forgot to delete that. Let's go ahead and refresh this. So there I go. I have my 3 card components, but they don't have this logic of toggling. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove, or I can just, take this functionality out of here. And I'm actually just out of my app. I'm going to remove, well, we can count the same. I'm going to remove that state to show front. I'm going to remove this function. I'm going to remove all of this JSX right here. So now we're just having the app render the cards. And I can just copy this render card function. And I can go ahead and throw this inside of here. So I have my render card function. And then here, let's just call it render card. Now I don't have this show front variable anymore, so I need to come back here and do my use state hook. And now I'm going to define the state in my card class. So show front and set show front. Now that's defined. And then I can go ahead. Let's add some style on this. Now we can actually do inline style, but let's just keep it as a class name for now. So I'm going to do class name equals card. And then I could go to my app.css. Let's do a card. I'm just going to keep this simple. Let's go ahead and do a width of 300 pixels. I'm thinking I'm writing in JavaScript, sorry. We can do, maybe it doesn't need to be that tall. Let's do a 200 by 200, height of 200 pixels. And then we can do like a border radius of, let's try 10 pixels. Okay, so now I have my card. I'm rendering my card. Oh, I did this wrong, sorry. Const show front and set show front. I need to set that equal to use state. And by default, we can set that to true. So by now, it's just defaulting the front. Let's just check this out, see if it's working. So show front is not defined, line 9 of app.js. Am I still using it? No, I thought I deleted it. Oh, there it is. So this is JSX, and now we see our front. It does not look like our card is, our CSS is taking effect. I might need to import it here. No, I shouldn't actually, I don't think I should have to, because this app dot, when I import this app CSS in here, it's just going to be applied globally. So that should be there. Let's see what's going on. Let's try to see. So we have our card class in our app.css. We have our .card. That looks right. I'm just going to do a border so I can see it. Still not getting it. Let's see here. Class name equals card. Oh, I'm only doing it on the back. Now really where I should do this is right here on this div. So I had it on here, but we weren't rendering the back, we were just rendering the front. And there we go. There's our card. Now, something that I can do really quick just to make this, it's not going to be that much, but it'll make it look a lot better. This border looks pretty bad. And I have this off-white background color. So here's a trick. I'm going to look for box Shadow Css. And right here, there's this get CSS scan. There's this 91 beautiful box shadows examples. So you can come here and you can kind of look at some different, options for shadows. Some might have a border, but you can kind of pick one out that matches what you're kind of going for. So it doesn't really matter for this, but let's go ahead. I'm kind of feeling 22, sure, that one looks good. So I click that and it copies it, and then I can go back to my CSS. And that copies that CSS there. Now, another trick I'm doing here is I have just a subtle off-white HTML background, and then I'm going to have, for my card, I'm going to have this background just be pure white. I go back here. I'm also going to get rid of this border. And there we go. Now I have just a cleaner effect. It's a lot better than the border. Just makes this look a little more professional, and it really wasn't even that much CSS to do that. Another thing I could quickly do is just adding padding, because this text is just right up in the middle. Or sorry, right up in the corner. So just a little padding will create a little bit of space between the card and the text. That's looking a little better. Still not perfect, but it's getting there. Let's maybe do a little less, 8. And then another thing I could do is in my app.js, maybe I wrap all of these cards in a div. And let's do another one. Let's just do like a flex class where we can use flexbox to kind of create some space around these. So I do class name equals flex, and then in my app.css, let's do a .flex. I can do display equals flex, and then justify content, and let's just do space around. And now that gives us just that space around. Like I said, it's not really, I'm not trying to make this perfect, but we can see a little CSS can go a long way with this. So now I have my 3 cards, and they're all saying front. So let's go ahead and add the toggle on this. So let's go back to my card. So I do have this set show front and the show front variables. So let's add the onClick actually right here on this div. onClick. Now I could write this in another function, but I can actually call this right here. Now I'm going to demo something really quick. I'm just going to do I keep on writing def. I'm going to do a const log function. And then I'm going to do a const log param. Or let's just call this, so we don't get this confused with Rails, let's do log thing. So this one's just going to go console.log hello. Just we're going to hard code that string, and this one's going to log the thing. Cool. So what I can do here is I can pass this log function on this onClick. So when I click on the card, it should say hello to the log. Let's go ahead and inspect and look at this. Click that, see there's my hello. Now let's go ahead and log thing. So I'm going to call this log thing function, and let's pass it this like testing. So I refresh this, and notice that's been called. I didn't even click anything, and that was called 3 times. And when I click on this, they're not being called. So what's happening when this page loads, this function is actually being called when we render it. See, because in JavaScript, when we use the parentheses, this says, hey, call the function. So when we return this, it actually calls the function. See, when we did the log, we're not calling it. We just pass it as a callback to this onClick. So it doesn't log it. But if I had the parentheses, then it would. Hello. But, you know, this log thing, I really have to pass it a parameter. Yo. Now, how do I pass this a parameter but not call it? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an anonymous function right here that returns this function. I'm going to do a separate video on this, but for now, just explaining what's going on here. But really what's going on here is we're creating a function that returns this, that when it's going to be clicked, it will then call that function. So we can kind of wrap this log function, log thing. So now when I run this, let's go ahead and hit refresh. I didn't save that, that's why it's still logging it. That should not be saying anything, so I'm going to clear it and refresh. So now that's not logging it, and now when I click on that, it logs the thing. Cool. So why I did this whole thing is because what I want to do, and I can delete these now, is when I do onClick, I'm just going to say, hey, let's set show front. I can just define this function right here to not show front. And now when I click on this, it's toggling. And notice each of their cards have their own state. I could also do, I could have all of these have their own count. Now, if I wanted to actually keep track of the count too, then I would need to have this be in a separate function, because I need to do more than one thing. So I can make like a handle click function. And then I could go ahead and do this, set show front, and set count to count plus 1. Then we could have a message inside of our each individual card. I have been clicked, and then we can interpolate count times. Oh, and then one thing I'd want to do is, I shouldn't have count be 0 or true by default. I should have it be something like 0. See, now these all start out on the front, and these have all been clicked 0 times. But then each one I can click, and they can maintain their own state. So now I have these cards that can maintain their own state. I can call actions on them separately. And yeah, so this is good. But another thing that's a little bad with here is they're saying front and back, front and back. Now that's not really useful. What I want to have happen is maybe I pass these things down what I want to have on the front and back. Now this is where props come in. And let's see what props are. But I hope the problem is clear that I want to be able to say something other than front and back, and I want these things to have different values for the front and back. Because maybe this is like a flashcard, card or something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass some props. So I'm going to have my card have a front text prop. And then I can set this to a string. Now front text is maybe a little vague. Since this is like a flashcard, maybe I call this question. What is 1 plus 1? And then I can give this an answer prop. 2. And then for my next card, I can say, hey, what is 2 plus 2? And that is 4. And then this one, I can say, who is the best tree friend painter? That obviously is Bob Ross. So I have these cards. All of my cards have question and answer. And these are called props. They all have like these question and answer props. Now the value of each of those props are going to be different for each card. And that's exactly what we want. We can reuse the logic of the card that can show the back and front, but then we can give it different values for the card. So now that I've defined these props here, how do I actually grab them in my card component? Well, we do that with props. And let's just console.log props. And another thing maybe we could do just to, we could make this maybe a little more clear. Let's just add an ID to all of these. An ID prop. So we have 1, 2, and 3. Nothing, this ID isn't, I'm just creating another prop called ID. Just making them different. So now if I refresh, card.js line 7, I'm getting undefined. All right, let's look at that. Oh, because I'm in my render card. I defined this in the wrong area. I need to define this, my card is going to get props, not that function. I need to set this parameter in my function props and call it props. Now I could call this x. This is just a function. I can call this parameter anything, but you know, this is React, and what this really is this is props. So let's name it what it actually is. And now when I log it, see, I have ID, question, and answer. Now this is just a object. And let me show you something else. We could go back to app.js. Let's say I have a card that doesn't have anything, and then a card that just has ID, you know, 4 and a taco prop. See, if I don't give it anything, it's still an object. It's just an empty object. And then, you know, this one's just going to have ID 4 and taco yo-yo. So we can pass whatever we want as props to our component. But you're going to find, you know, you want to have consistent, when you reuse your component, you want to have consistent props, just so you can know what to expect, what you're going to get. So for a card, maybe we don't need the ID, we can leave it there, but I think for a card, we're pretty much, we want a question and answer. So in all of these, we can see, hey, there's going to be a props.question and props.answer. And let's just take one of these objects here. I'm going to just let obj equal that. I'm just typing JavaScript right here, so there it is. I can do what's called destructuring. I can say like const, and I can pull off things from this object. That's ID, question, answer. This is some ES6 stuff, which is JavaScript. Oh, I called it object. Object. Now I have ID defined, I have question defined, and I have answer defined. So this is ES6 destructuring. It's just a JavaScript feature. So what I could do here in my component is I can say const, and I can pull off these values from my props. I can get my ID, I can grab the question and answer equal props. Now instead of saying front, I can say question. And then saying this, instead of saying back, I use my answer prop. And yeah, maybe if I want, I could do my ID here. So now let's look at what's going on here. And actually, let me get rid of this one card. Cool. So I have my ID, 1, 2, 3. Those are my IDs of the card. And there I have my question. What is 1 plus 1? What is 2 plus 2? Who is the best tree friend painter? And then I can click on this, and then it shows the answer. What is 2 plus 2? Well, that's 4. What is 1 plus 1? That's 2. Boom. And just like that, we've made a flashcard assignment that has, you know, functionality of being able to click, show the question and answer. And really, the nice thing about this is we have one card component that handles kind of the more complicated stuff of toggling the card, of showing the question and answer, handling the click. You know, maybe if we had something like counting how many times it's been clicked, we can throw all of that logic inside of here. So we define our function once. We define this component once. But then we can reuse it as many times as we want. And we could create, you know, 1,000 cards. And then the cards are really easy to create. You know, I can come in and create another flex box here. You know, now I don't even really need to think about code. Now I just need to do the question and answer. And I'm using all of that complicated logic over again. And there we go. So yeah, that's a basic introduction into React and into state and props. So I think that's a good ending point for this video. Hopefully you see the advantage. This would be hard to do with vanilla JavaScript. It'd be much harder to do with vanilla JavaScript. React is going to make this kind of thing a lot easier for us, and it's going to allow us to build these complicated UIs because we're able to build these smaller components, and then we can build components on components and just reuse that logic. So cool, play around with this, have fun with it, and yeah, we'll throw out another one. But I think that's it for now.